Okay, so here we are. We're back in Berlin. It's 1989, and people are partying. People are ready to party. The wall has just come down. There's a whole bunch of abandoned buildings in East Berlin, and people from West Berlin are going over there, checking them out, and starting to throw these illegal dance parties in these abandoned buildings. And at this time, the city has been cooped up for so long that they just want to party. This new identity for the city is blossoming, and there's this new music that they're able to dance to and explore, and it's a very exciting time. So this is kind of the vibe. These photos are probably from more recent than back then, but this is the idea. This guy looks pretty sweet. Um, these abandoned buildings, people would put up a sound system and some lights and throw these parties. So there were huge successes, and tons of people started coming from around the world to Berlin to party and to DJ. More and more people were getting excited about this music, and Berlin was the place to be because during this time, the cops didn't stop any of these illegal parties in the abandoned buildings. And this is because the cops largely had other things to worry about. And after all this time with the Berlin Wall, the fact that kids were partying illegally just wasn't that much of a priority as long as everyone was safe. And so, yeah, the scene grew and grew, and the music got more and more awesome. The other thing that was happening is because Berlin was rebuilding in this time, and because there were so many abandoned buildings, it was actually really cheap to live in Berlin. So tons of artists from around the world were coming there for that reason as well. And artists, and also people who just wanted to party, because you could party from Thursday night to Tuesday morning and still pay rent every month, because it was really cheap. So this was awesome, and this sort of freedom, real cultural freedom to be whoever you want to be and party in these buildings, lasted about 5 years before the government started to crack down. But when they did start to crack down, a lot of these people who were throwing these parties use that money to then use the money they made throwing the illegal parties to then buy buildings and throw legal parties. And a lot of these buildings are now actually still clubs in Berlin, and the owners were around at that time. So we can go to one now. This is Tresor. This is a club in Berlin. That is pretty sweet. They play lots of techno here, and people still dance, and it's awesome. So the scene was growing and growing, and it got so big that there was this parade that they threw called the Love Parade. And just to give you an idea of how insane the scene was, here are some photos from the Love Parade in 1995. Love Parade was hugely successful, too successful to the point that one year there was 1.4 million people that came, and it wasn't planned out properly enough, and there was a problem getting out of the park, getting out of the party area. So that was the end of the Love Parade, and that's very sad. But just to give you an idea of how insane the scene was and how many people were going there to party. And so what happened when the tourism started to grow, and when the government did finally shut down these illegal parties, they realized how important the tourism money was from people coming to party there. So they didn't change the vibe too much. They made it so that you could still party all night. There's no curfew in Berlin for when the party stops, and that's still true. And so they maintained a lot of that culture because they realized it was such a big moneymaker for tourism, and it was also important culturally to their identity. But what ended up happening was, because so many people were coming from around the world to these parties, it ended up being sometimes that there were more tourists than there were German people who really understood the culture. And so the culture started to get kind of watered down. The consequence of that was the door policy started to get way more intense. People started to really curate the parties. That means the bouncer would be very strict about who he would let in, and who he or she would let in, and who they would not let in. And this was to maintain the culture of inclusivity on the inside, so that you could be whoever you wanted to be once you got into the party. Um, yeah, so you could be whoever you want to be once you got in, but you had to get in. So there's no more famous bouncer than in Berlin than this guy. This guy's Sven with the face tattoos and piercings. He is the bouncer at a very famous club in Berlin called Berghain. So let's go to Berghain. Yeah, the scene grew so much here to the point that now there's over 300 dance clubs like this. So here we are again. This is Berghain, another large building. People line up here. Lineups are crazy. And people don't show up here until about 2 a.m. and they party until about noon the next day. Another thing about the club scene here is there's a no photo policy. And this is again to maintain the vibe there. So you're not allowed to take pictures in the club, and that's so that everyone is actually there, in the moment when they're in the club. They're not worried about like their Instagram or, posting photos of themselves or other people. What else? Yeah. Here's some music that you would hear at Berghain. This is this guy, Ben Clock. So as you can hear, it's like pretty dark, 4 on the floor, bass drum driven. And as you can imagine here, the lights are crazy. And it's a very different dance culture. The idea is that you don't really dance with a partner. You kind of dance by yourself. And or everyone in the party is dancing together in a way that is different than with a lot of other kinds of, than you dance to a lot of other kinds of music. And the other thing about the music is it's different in that you don't play a 4-minute song and then stop and everybody claps. It's like the music goes, your set will last an hour if you're DJing and everyone will clap at the end. But the music even then won't actually stop. They'll just transition into another DJ. So yeah, it's a really cool scene, and it's totally different than what we have in Toronto. We don't have this kind of scene in Toronto. Once in a while there'll be a party, maybe at the Pride Parade that features this kind of music. But here there's over 300 nightclubs that play in Berlin that play this kind of music. The other thing to say about the Pride Parade is this music, again, it's all about inclusivity once you get in. So a lot of people are really free to be whoever they are. So it's popular with a bunch of different kinds of people and a bunch of different people. And yeah, so that's a little bit about Berlin techno. I hope you guys enjoyed. And, you can write to me with questions through Regent Park if you have any, and I'll include some more stuff to listen to. That's it. Hope everyone's staying healthy. Thanks, guys.